You think you know the man who sleeps beside you every night until you watch him turn you into a pawn. For 8 years, I believed Julian was the perfect husband. But the small box hidden inside my suitcase that morning proved otherwise. I did not scream or cry. I simply returned that deadly gift to its rightful owner, smiling as their carefully orchestrated charade completely collapsed right at the airport security gate. Hello and welcome back to Zoe Revenge Stories, our wonderful listeners. Unfortunately, YouTube has recently disabled our channel's monetization, leaving us with absolutely no budget to keep operating. If you find today's story compelling, please consider supporting us with just $1 so we can pay our hardworking staff to cover their living expenses and continue creating these thrilling stories for you. You can easily donate by scanning the PayPal QR code currently on your screen, or by clicking the PayPal link located in the video description or the pinned comment below. Thank you so much for your generosity. My name is Mackenzie Alvarado. I am 34 years old, and I work as a senior restoration expert at Ethelgard Restorations. My daily professional life revolves around examining the minute details of damaged artifacts, understanding the history of broken things, and painstakingly bringing them back to their original state. But nothing in my years of training could have prepared me for the meticulous dissection of my own life, which began in the suffocating darkness of our bedroom. It was exactly 4:15 in the morning in Austin, Texas. The heavy, humid air of the southern night clung to the windows, and the entire house was submerged in a profound, heavy silence. I am normally a very deep sleeper, but something primal woke me. It was not a loud noise. It was the faint metallic rasp of a zipper being pulled with agonizing slowness. It was a sound so out of place in the sacred quiet of the pre-dawn hours that it commanded my brain to snap to full awareness. I did not move a single muscle. I kept my breathing slow, deep, and rhythmic, perfectly mimicking the steady rise and fall of a sleeping woman. Through the narrowest slit of my eyelids, I peered into the shadows of the room. The amber glow from the street lamp outside sliced through the gaps in the window blinds, casting pale golden bars across the carpet. Kneeling right in the middle of that faint light was my husband, Julian. He was positioned over my brand-new silver hard-shell suitcase, the very same suitcase he had gifted me just weeks prior. In his right hand, he held a small, sharp utility knife. I watched, paralyzed by a bizarre mix of fascination and horror, as the man I had shared a bed with for 8 years carefully inserted the tip of the blade into the inner fabric lining of my luggage. He made a clean, practiced incision. There was no hesitation in his movements. Julian then reached onto the floor beside him and picked up a flat, heavy-looking metal box. It was entirely wrapped in thick black electrical tape. The object looked inherently wrong, like a dark anomaly invading the pristine interior of my belongings. With chilling precision, he slipped the taped box deep behind the freshly cut fabric, pushing it down until it was completely hidden from plain sight. He then smoothed the lining back over it, his fingers pressing firmly to ensure the fabric sat flush against the hard plastic shell. What terrified me the most was not the knife or the hidden package. It was his face. Illuminated by the weak streetlight, Julian's expression was completely devoid of emotion. He did not look like a nervous husband sneaking around, nor did he look guilty. His features were set in stone. His jaw locked, his eyes cold and calculating. It was the face of a ruthless man finalizing a bloodless, high-stakes transaction. I was looking at a complete stranger. My mind began to race, piecing together the timeline of the past few weeks. Our flight to Seattle was scheduled for exactly 8 o'clock this morning. Julian had spent the last month practically begging me to accompany him on this business trip. He had framed it as the perfect opportunity to spend some quality time together, and all expenses paid getaway to, in his own charming words, rekindle the romance in our busy lives. I had believed him. I had packed my favorite dresses, booked dinner reservations, and allowed myself to feel completely excited about our future. Lying there in the dark, feeling the cold sweat prickle along my spine, I realized the horrifying truth. The romantic getaway was a meticulously designed stage. The 8 years of marriage, the shared laughter, the vows we took, they all evaporated into the heavy Texas air, leaving nothing behind but the bitter taste of betrayal. My heart hammered violently against my ribs, threatening to shatter the illusion of my sleep, but I forced it down. I swallowed the rising panic. In a matter of seconds, the grieving wife died, and the survivor took her first breath. I maintained my steady breathing until Julian finally stood up. He quietly closed the suitcase, zipped it up, and walked softly toward the ensuite bathroom. The click of the door closing was immediately followed by the loud hiss of the shower turning on. The rushing water provided the perfect acoustic cover. I threw off the duvet and slid out of bed with the silent grace of a ghost. I dropped to my knees beside the silver suitcase and unzipped it. My hands were shaking, but my mind was crystal clear. I parted the clothes I had so happily packed the night before and ran my fingers lightly over the fabric lining. There it was, the imperceptible seam he had created. Drawing upon my professional training at Ethelgard, where preserving the integrity of an object is paramount, I knew exactly what not to do. I did not touch the black box. I did not attempt to pull it out or examine it. Any disruption could leave traces of my interference. Instead, I carefully pulled out my smartphone. Ensuring the flash was completely disabled, I took 3 clear, high-resolution photographs of the cut lining and the faint outline of the hidden package beneath it. I zipped the suitcase back up, smoothing out my clothes so everything looked entirely undisturbed. As I slipped back under the warm covers just moments before the bathroom door opened, I made a silent vow to the dark room. Julian thought he was the director of this elaborate play, but he had severely underestimated the woman he married. I was not going to be a victim, and I certainly was not going to be his collateral damage. The scent of freshly ground Colombian roast drifted up the staircase, a comforting domestic aroma that felt violently out of place this morning. I walked down the carpeted steps, making sure my footsteps were light and unhurried. I composed my facial expression into the bright mask of an excited wife, ready for a long overdue romantic getaway. When I entered our sunlit kitchen, the scene before me was so sickeningly picturesque it could have been clipped straight from a luxury lifestyle magazine. Julian was standing by the pristine marble island, bathed in the golden morning light. He wore a crisp, perfectly tailored slate gray button-down shirt, the sleeves casually rolled up to his forearms to expose his expensive silver wristwatch. He looked handsome, successful, and entirely unbothered. There was no trace of the cold stranger I had observed kneeling in the dark just hours ago. As he heard me approach, he turned around and offered a smile so warm, so incredibly genuine, that had I not witnessed his clinical precision with a utility knife, I would have fallen for it completely. "Good morning, beautiful," he said, his voice a smooth baritone as he poured steaming dark liquid into my favorite ceramic mug. "Did you manage to sleep well?" "Like a log," I replied effortlessly, walking over and taking the warm mug from his hands. Our fingers brushed against each other for a brief second, and it took absolutely every ounce of my trained willpower not to flinch physically away from his touch. I brought the thick rim to my lips, letting the scalding heat of the black coffee ground me to reality. I am just so excited for this trip. I feel like it has been ages since we actually took a proper break together. Julian leaned casually against the counter, crossing his ankles. "Me too. It is going to be exactly what we need. Just the two of us, good food, and zero distractions. Oh, by the way," he added, his tone shifting imperceptibly into something breezy and utterly unremarkable. "I completely forgot to mention this last night. Vanessa is actually going to be on our flight this morning." I took another slow, deliberate sip of my coffee, letting the liquid burn the back of my throat. Vanessa Reed, Julian's newly hired executive assistant. She was 26 years old, possessed a professional wardrobe entirely composed of aggressively tailored designer clothes, and wielded a raw ambition that practically radiated from her pores. "Vanessa," I asked, keeping my vocal pitch light, airy, and entirely devoid of any sharp edges. I thought this particular trip was strictly just the senior executive team going, It is technically, Julian nodded, picking up his own mug. But the ground logistics for the Seattle conference have become a bit of a nightmare over the last 48 hours. The board decided at the very last minute that we desperately needed hands-on support on the ground. She is just flying out to ensure all the meeting venues are properly prepped and the executive schedules align perfectly. Do not worry at all. We probably will not even see her after we land and grab our bags. She has her own entirely separate itinerary. I nodded thoughtfully, pretending to be mildly interested while staring down at the swirling dark surface of my coffee. Deep inside my mind, however, a series of disjointed, previously ignored memories from the past 30 days snapped into sharp, undeniable focus. I remembered the company holiday party last month, the specific way Vanessa's heavily mascaraed eyes had lingered on Julian's mouth when she spoke to him. It was a gaze that was far too hungry, far too intimate for a professional setting. I remembered the Tuesday evening Julian came home incredibly late, claiming he was utterly exhausted from being stuck in a grueling strategy meeting. But when I hung up his suit jacket, the collar carried the faint, undeniable notes of sandalwood and sweet jasmine. It was a heavy, intoxicating scent that certainly did not belong to my perfume collection, nor did it belong to the sterile environment of a corporate boardroom. The scattered pieces of the puzzle slammed together with the brutal force of a physical blow. The hidden metal box wrapped in black tape. The sudden desperate need for a spontaneous couples trip to rekindle our romance. The highly ambitious secretary conveniently flying out on the exact same morning flight. I decided to gently test the waters, casting an invisible net over his perfect facade. Well, that is good. She will be there to handle the boring parts. Does that mean your afternoon on Tuesday is completely free now? I was really hoping we could finally make it to that famous seafood place by the waterfront you mentioned. Julian did not miss a single beat. Absolutely. In fact, I have already preemptively pushed my Tuesday afternoon regional debrief to Wednesday morning. We have a solid 4-hour window between 2 o'clock and 6 o'clock to just walk around the pier, grab some oysters, and relax. His response was immediate. It was far too fluent, far too polished. There was absolutely no natural hesitation, no pausing to mentally check his calendar, no momentary struggle to recall the specific restaurant. He was flawlessly reciting lines from a heavily rehearsed script. He had thoroughly anticipated my potential questions and prepared the perfect reassuring answers to keep me completely docile and oblivious. As I stood there in my own beautiful kitchen, bathed in the morning sunlight, casually exchanging domestic pleasantries with the man I had publicly promised to love in sickness and in health, the horrific true nature of my existence within his grand design became terrifyingly clear. I was never meant to be a cherished wife on a romantic vacation. I was the perfect unwitting camouflage. A man traveling completely alone, or a man traveling alongside his very young, attractive secretary, might naturally attract a second glance from airport customs or federal security. But a married couple, a respectable middle-aged husband and wife, traveling harmoniously together for a documented vacation with their matching luggage. We were the ultimate picture of benign suburban normalcy. We were practically invisible to the watchful eyes of authority. Julian was not taking me to Seattle to save our stagnant marriage. He was actively using my clean background, my calm professional demeanor, and the very legal sanctity of our marital relationship as a physical shield. I was nothing more than a legally bound, unsuspicious pack mule, specifically designated to unknowingly carry a metallic package of absolute ruin straight through federal airport security, while he walked confidently through the metal detectors with clean hands. I set my empty ceramic mug down on the cold marble counter. I looked directly into his eyes, effortlessly matching his perfect synthetic smile with a brilliant one of my own. "That sounds absolutely perfect, Julian," I said smoothly, my voice steady and sweet. "I am going to go upstairs, grab my silver suitcase, and bring it down. We should probably call the private car service to the airport soon." "Great idea, honey," he smiled back warmly. taking a final sip of his coffee, completely unaware that the quiet woman looking at him had already systematically rewritten the ending to his meticulously planned tragedy. The main terminal of Austin Bergstrom International Airport was a suffocating collision of noise-rushing bodies, and the sharp scent of floor wax mixed with stale coffee. The morning rush hour was at its absolute peak. Hundreds of travelers scrambled toward their designated gates, their rolling luggage creating a relentless, rumbling bassline beneath the chaotic symphony of overhead announcements and frustrated chatter. I navigated through the dense crowd with my silver hard-shell suitcase gliding smoothly beside me, my senses heightened to an excruciating level. Every single nerve ending in my body was vibrating with the sheer adrenaline of what I was about to do. We halted near the entrance of the primary TSA security checkpoint. That was when Vanessa Reed finally made her grand entrance. She strode through the sliding glass doors looking as though she was arriving at a fashion shoot, rather than a morning flight, wearing a fitted beige trench coat and oversized dark sunglasses. But my eyes instantly bypassed her designer clothes and locked dead onto her right hand. Trailing right behind her, its wheels spinning effortlessly over the polished concrete floor, was a silver hard-shell suitcase. It was not just similar to mine. It was the exact same limited edition model Julian had proudly presented to me last month. The audacity of his plan hit me with the force of a physical blow, followed immediately by a chilling wave of clarity. Buying his wife and his mistress the exact same luggage was not a lazy mistake made by an uncreative man. It was a highly calculated tactical decision. It was functional camouflage designed to create reasonable doubt. If anything went wrong, the identical bags would generate confusion, allowing him to easily orchestrate a mix-up. I stared at the twin silver suitcases standing merely 3 feet apart on the terminal floor, realizing the depth of the trap he had laid for me. "Good morning, Julian." "Good morning, Mackenzie," Vanessa said smoothly, her voice a perfectly modulated purr. She flashed a dazzling practiced smile that did not reach her heavily contoured eyes. "Vanessa," I replied, matching her perfectly fake enthusiasm. "So glad you could make it to help with the heavy lifting." The three of us merged into the winding claustrophobic maze of the security line. The tension in the air was palpable, thick enough to choke on. As we finally approached the metal tables and the gray plastic bins, the choreography of Julian's betrayal played out exactly as I had anticipated. He suddenly stopped walking. He patted his jacket pockets with an exaggerated look of mild panic, pretending to search for his boarding pass, effectively creating a solid physical distance between us. He gestured for me to go ahead. He wanted me to place my luggage onto the conveyor belt first. He desperately needed a buffer zone of at least 2 people between his clean hands and the black box currently sitting at the bottom of my suitcase. Vanessa, playing her oblivious role perfectly, stepped right up behind me, placing her identical silver bag onto the stainless steel rollers right next to mine. I grabbed 3 gray bins. I took off my shoes. I placed my laptop in one bin, my light jacket in another. I hoisted my heavy silver suitcase onto the belt. Vanessa did the same right behind me. Our identical bags were sitting nose to tail on the moving rubber track. Then the universe handed me a gift wrapped in pure chaos. Directly in front of me stood a frantic businessman attempting to juggle 2 heavy briefcases, a travel pillow, and a large iced coffee. As he reached forward to push his items toward the scanning tunnel, the strap of his heavy briefcase caught the edge of his plastic bin. The bin flipped violently. It crashed onto the hard metal floor with an echoing explosive clatter. A heavy laptop smashed against the tiles. Loose coins, metal pens, and keys scattered everywhere in a loud, chaotic, metallic rain. The iced coffee ruptured, sending a massive wave of brown liquid splashing across the sterile floor. "Oh, for God's sake!" the businessman shouted, dropping to his knees. Every single head snapped toward the sudden noise. The 2 TSA agents manning the X-ray monitor instantly stepped away from their screens and rushed forward to contain the spill. I glanced back over my shoulder. Julian was looking away, his brow furrowed in annoyance at the delay. Vanessa had stepped back to avoid the splashing coffee, her oversized sunglasses sliding down her nose as she looked down at the mess. They were completely distracted. The agents were distracted. I had exactly 5 seconds. My heart hammered a frantic rhythm against my ribs, but my hands were utterly steady. Years of restoring delicate, priceless antiquities had blessed me with a surgeon's dexterity. My fingers darted out like striking vipers. I grabbed the thick black leather name tag strapped to the top handle of Vanessa's silver suitcase. One quick flick of the metal buckle and it was loose. I simultaneously unsnapped the red leather tag from my own suitcase. 1 second, 2 seconds. I swapped them. I secured Vanessa's black tag onto my bag, the one carrying the deadly cargo. I snapped my red tag onto her clean bag. 3 seconds. 4 seconds. I grabbed the heavy top handles of both suitcases. With a sharp, powerful twist of my wrists, I hoisted them slightly off the rollers and swapped their physical positions on the belt. My bag was now at the back. Vanessa's bag was now at the front. 5 seconds. Time resumed. The TSA agent yelled for the line to keep moving. The rubber conveyor belt jerked forward with a mechanical groan. I quickly stepped up to the body scanner, raising my arms overhead as the glass doors closed around me. Through the transparent walls of the machine, I watched the identical silver suitcases inch toward the dark, gaping maw of the X-ray tunnel. I stepped out of the scanner. The agent nodded, clearing me. I walked over to the collection area and put my shoes back on. I turned around just as Julian walked through the standard metal detector. He looked at me, letting out a quiet sigh of relief. The hardest part of his terrible plan was supposedly over. I looked right back into his deceiving eyes and offered him a soft, reassuring smile. The first silver suitcase, the one now bearing my red name tag, glided smoothly out of the X-ray machine. Clean, unflagged. Then the second suitcase entered the scanner. The one carrying the black box. The one explicitly tagged with Vanessa Reed's name. The mechanical hum of the X-ray machine was suddenly shattered by a violent, piercing electronic shriek. It was an alarm so loud and aggressive it cut through the ambient noise of the entire terminal. The conveyor belt stopped with a violent, jarring halt. A thick metal mechanical arm swung out from the side of the machine with a heavy thud, brutally shoving the second silver suitcase off the main track and pushing it directly into the glass-enclosed secondary inspection lane. The trap had snapped shut, but the wrong rat was in the cage. The piercing shriek of the security alarm did not just stop the conveyor belt. It paralyzed the entire checkpoint. The chaotic hum of the airport terminal instantly died, replaced by a suffocating heavy silence that pressed down on my chest. Within seconds, the standard protocol escalated into a full-blown lockdown. 4 uniformed Transportation Security Administration agents swarmed the secondary inspection lane, their faces hardened into masks of professional severity. They moved with coordinated, aggressive precision, forming a human barricade around the glass enclosure. Before anyone could even whisper a question, 2 tall men wearing unremarkable gray suits materialized from the shadows near the supervisor podium. Their lack of uniform was far more intimidating than any badge. They were federal agents moving with the quiet, lethal grace of predators closing in on a kill. The taller of the 2 men, possessing eyes as cold and flat as slate, stepped up to the metal table where the flagged silver suitcase now rested. "Who is the owner of this luggage?" the federal agent demanded. His voice was not loud, but it possessed a sharp, cutting authority that commanded absolute obedience. I stood perfectly still, letting the manufactured fear widen my eyes. Beside me, I could practically feel the heat radiating from Julian. He shifted his weight, and out of the corner of my eye I saw it. It was a minuscule, almost imperceptible lifting of his right cheek. A smirk. He was standing there watching the trap spring, firmly believing that my name was still attached to that doomed piece of plastic. He thought he was watching the final successful execution of his brilliant, cold-blooded masterpiece. "That is mine," Vanessa announced loudly. She stepped forward, her voice dripping with a toxic mixture of aristocratic entitlement and deep annoyance. She pushed her oversized dark sunglasses up onto the crown of her head, glaring at the federal agents as if they were incompetent hotel staff who had lost her dinner reservation. She confidently placed her manicured hand on the metal table, completely oblivious to the radioactive ground she was standing on. Julian's smirk remained firmly in place. He clearly thought Vanessa was just claiming the bag by mistake because they looked identical. He waited for the inevitable correction the moment the agents would look at the tag, read my name, and drag me away. "Step back, ma'am," the federal agent ordered, pulling a pair of thick blue nitrile gloves from his pocket and snapping them over his hands. The agent laid the silver suitcase flat on the inspection table and unzipped it. He completely bypassed the neatly folded designer clothes and drove his gloved hands straight down to the bottom corners of the luggage. His fingers probed the fabric lining for mere seconds before he found the unnatural lump. With a swift, practiced motion, he grabbed the hidden object and forcefully tore the inner fabric right open. He pulled out the heavy flat metal box entirely wrapped in black electrical tape and dropped it onto the metal table with a loud, hollow thud. The air around us seemed to instantly freeze. I turned my head slightly to look at Julian. The transformation of his face was an absolute masterpiece of psychological collapse. The arrogant smirk did not just fade, it shattered. The color rapidly drained from his cheeks, leaving his skin an ashen, sickly gray. His eyes, completely wide with raw panic, darted frantically from the taped box sitting on the table directly to the black leather luggage tag dangling off the top handle. The tag clearly and undeniably read, "Vanessa Reed." I could almost hear the gears grinding in his head, desperately trying to comprehend the impossible reality unfolding before him. The luggage had been swapped. His foolproof plan had violently derailed, and the speeding train was now heading straight for him. The federal agent pulled a switchblade from his pocket and meticulously sliced through the thick layers of black tape. He popped the metal lid open. Inside the box was not illicit narcotics or standard contraband. Resting on a bed of anti-static foam was a sleek military-grade encrypted hard drive. I knew exactly what it was. Julian had mentioned it weeks ago during a drunken rant about company security. It contained the highly classified proprietary source code for a revolutionary data encryption algorithm developed by his own tech firm. It was intellectual property worth tens of millions of dollars on the black market. But the hard drive was not the only item nestled in the foam. The agent reached in and pulled out a small, dark blue booklet. He flipped it open, and even from my position I could see the contents clearly. It was a freshly minted, perfectly forged passport. The name printed next to the biographical data was completely foreign, but the photograph glued perfectly onto the page was unmistakably Vanessa. Tucked neatly inside the pages of the fraudulent passport was a printed paper boarding pass. It was a one-way first-class ticket to a sovereign nation that notably possessed absolutely no extradition treaty with the United States. The sheer gravity of the situation slammed into the terminal. This was no longer a simple smuggling attempt. This was a highly orchestrated corporate espionage operation combined with a meticulously planned international escape route. "What is that?" Vanessa shrieked, her voice cracking, as the aristocratic facade violently crumbled. "That is not mine." "I have never seen that passport in my entire life," Julian told them. Julian could not speak. He was hyperventilating. His chest heaved erratically beneath his perfectly tailored slate-gray shirt. His knees buckled slightly, his polished leather shoes slipping on the slick floor as his legs threatened to give way entirely. The hunter had just realized he was locked inside his own cage and the walls were rapidly closing in. This was my cue. I let out a sharp theatrical gasp. I stumbled backward, a single step perfectly playing the role of the horrified, confused suburban wife. I reached out and tightly grabbed Julian's forearm, digging my nails into his expensive shirt. I clung to him exactly the way a frightened woman should. "Julian, what is happening?" I cried out, ensuring my voice trembled with just the right amount of manufactured hysteria. "What is going on?" He turned his head to look at me. He was searching my face for an answer, for comfort, for anything. But while my hands gripped his arm in a desperate, terrified hold, my eyes offered absolutely no sanctuary. I stared straight into his panicked soul, my gaze as cold-dead and sharp as a surgeon's scalpel. In that fleeting silent exchange right under the blinding fluorescent lights of the security checkpoint, he finally understood. He saw the predator staring back at him. The stark contrast between the vibrant, echoing airport terminal and the windowless federal interrogation room felt like stepping out of the real world and into a concrete tomb. We were escorted by armed guards through a labyrinth of restricted back corridors. The room they placed us in was claustrophobic, illuminated by harshly buzzing fluorescent tubes that cast sickly pale shadows across our faces. A heavy steel table bolted firmly to the linoleum floor sat in the dead center. There were exactly 3 metal chairs on our side. The 2 federal agents stood on the opposite side, their postures relaxed but radiating an aura of absolute control. The black box, the encrypted hard drive, and the fraudulent passport were laid out on the metal surface like autopsy tools, ready to dissect our lives. The heavy steel door slammed shut, and the hollow echo sealed our fate. The silence lasted for exactly 3 seconds, before the pristine, arrogant facade of Vanessa Reed shattered into a million jagged pieces. "It was him!" Vanessa shrieked, her voice bouncing violently off the concrete walls. She bolted out of her metal chair, her manicured finger pointing directly at Julian's pale face. Her expensive trench coat was completely rumpled and tears of pure, unadulterated panic were streaming down her face, ruining her perfect makeup. I had absolutely nothing to do with that box. Julian put it in there. He told me he was going to hide the stolen drive in his stupid wife's luggage. He said she was too boring and clean for anyone to suspect her. He told me she was going to be the mule that she would take the fall, and the 2 of us would disappear together to Europe. The absolute silence that followed her frantic confession was deafening. I sat perfectly still in my chair, keeping my hands folded neatly on my lap, playing the role of the shell-shocked spouse processing an unimaginable betrayal. But inside, I was savoring every single syllable she screamed. She was eagerly digging her own grave while simultaneously burying Julian alive. Julian sat frozen, his jaw hanging slightly open. The color had completely vanished from his skin. He looked like a corpse propped up in a metal chair. He tried to speak, but his vocal cords refused to produce anything more than a pathetic dry rasp. The lead federal agent, the tall man with the slate-colored eyes, did not even blink at her hysterical outburst. He slowly leaned forward and placed his index finger on the dark blue passport lying on the table. "Is that so, Miss Reed?" The agent asked, his voice a low, gravelly monotone that sliced right through her screaming. "You say Mr. Alvarado planned to run away with you to Europe. Then how do you explain this? This is a highly sophisticated forged document containing your exact biometric photograph, but issued under a completely fake identity. And the boarding pass tucked inside is not for a romantic European getaway. It is a one-way ticket on a private charter flight heading to a non-extradition territory in South America." Vanessa stopped screaming. She stared blankly at the dark blue booklet. Her heavy breathing slowed down as pure, unadulterated confusion washed over her face. "I have never seen that book in my life," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I swear to God. Julian, what is he talking about?" The agent did not let Julian answer. He picked up a thick manila folder from the table and flipped it open. According to the preliminary digital forensics we conducted on the corporate network this morning, the encrypted source code was downloaded using your specific security clearance credentials. Miss Reed. There is also a trail of encrypted emails sent from your company terminal negotiating the sale of this stolen data to a foreign syndicate for exactly $5 million. It paints a very clear, undeniable picture. A young, highly ambitious executive assistant steals the company's most valuable asset, prints a fake passport, stashes the goods in her luggage, and attempts to flee the country to cash in her $5 million payday. The air in the room grew completely stagnant. The horrific multi-layered depth of Julian's psychopathy finally laid itself bare under the harsh fluorescent lights. He never had any intention of running away with his beautiful young secretary. He was not abandoning his life for love or lust. He was orchestrating the ultimate corporate heist, and he needed 2 sacrificial lambs to guarantee his own survival. He was going to let airport security find the box in my suitcase. I would be arrested for smuggling stolen corporate property. But the presence of Vanessa's fake passport and the digital trail linking the theft to her computer would immediately pivot the federal investigation away from me being the mastermind and squarely onto Vanessa. I would take the immediate fall at the airport, causing a massive distraction, while Vanessa would be hunted down as the true orchestrator of the grand theft. Julian, meanwhile, would play the tragic, completely innocent victim. The devastated husband whose wife was caught up in a criminal conspiracy, and the betrayed executive whose trusted assistant sold him out. He would walk away completely clean, his reputation intact, and quietly collect the $5 million from the foreign syndicate through a proxy account. It was a masterpiece of absolute sociopathy. Vanessa stared at the forged passport, then slowly turned her head to look at the man she had believed was going to give her the world. The realization hit her physical body like a violent electric shock. The man she had slept with, the man she had helped plot against an innocent wife, had viewed her as nothing more than a convenient disposable meat shield to protect his $5 million payout. "You bastard!" Vanessa hissed, her voice dropping an entire octave into a guttural, feral growl. "You absolute sickening monster!" She did not just yell. She launched herself across the small space between them. Her hands curled into claws aiming directly for his face. She crashed into Julian, sending his metal chair toppling backward. They hit the linoleum floor with a sickening thud. Vanessa straddled his chest, screaming incoherently, her manicured nails raking violently across his cheek and tearing the collar of his perfect slate-gray shirt. "I gave you everything!" she shrieked, scratching at his face as Julian desperately threw his arms up to protect his eyes. "You were going to let me rot in federal prison. You were going to frame me for everything." The 2 armed guards stationed by the door immediately rushed forward. They grabbed Vanessa by her arms and forcefully hauled her off the bleeding man, dragging her to the far corner of the room, while she kicked and spat like a wild animal caught in a snare. Julian rolled onto his side, coughing and gasping for air. 3 deep, bloody scratches ran down his left cheek. His expensive watch had shattered against the floor. He slowly pushed himself up onto his knees, his chest heaving. He looked absolutely destroyed, completely stripped of his arrogance, his wealth, and his power. He slowly lifted his head and looked across the overturned chair. His terrified, wide eyes locked onto mine. I was still sitting perfectly upright, my posture completely undisturbed, my face a mask of absolute chilling calm. I watched his pupils dilate as his brain rapidly processed the sequence of events at the security checkpoint. The identical silver suitcases. The dropped plastic bin that caused the distraction. The sudden swap of the luggage tags. He realized that the switch was not an accident. He realized that his perfectly obedient, predictable wife had seen through his entire charade. He finally understood that I had not just survived his trap. I had forcefully shoved him and his mistress right into it. His lips trembled, parting slightly as if he wanted to beg for mercy, to plead for the woman he had spent 8 years with, to somehow save him from the abyss. But looking into my eyes, all he found was a reflection of his own ruthless cruelty mirrored back at him with lethal precision. The heavy steel door of the interrogation room opened again, and a tech specialist walked in handing a digital tablet to the lead federal agent. The swift and brutal efficiency of the United States government was a marvel to witness. Within the hour, they had completely bypassed the basic security measures on Julian and Vanessa's confiscated smartphones. The digital forensics team had successfully recovered a goldmine of deleted encrypted messages detailing the entire illicit transaction. They found the offshore proxy accounts, the exact coordinates for the charter flight, and the damning communications with the foreign syndicate. The trap was watertight, and every single piece of evidence pointed firmly at the bleeding man on the floor and the hysterical woman screaming in the corner. The lead agent reviewed the data on the screen, then slowly closed the folder. He turned his slate-colored eyes toward me. His hardened expression softened just a fraction, offering a rare glimpse of professional sympathy. "Mrs. Alvarado," he said quietly, his tone vastly different from the one he had used on the other two. "We have thoroughly searched your personal luggage and run a comprehensive background check. Everything is completely clean. It is abundantly clear that you are an unwitting victim in your husband's scheme. You are officially cleared of any suspicion, and you are free to leave immediately. We will contact you if we need any formal statements later." "Thank you, Agent," I replied, my voice steady and polite. I stood up from the metal chair, smoothing down the front of my skirt. I picked up my purse. I did not rush. I let every single movement be deliberate, taking up space in a room where Julian had intended for me to lose my freedom forever. As I walked toward the open steel door, I paused. I turned around and walked slowly over to where Julian was sitting slumped over the metal table. He looked up at me, his face scratched bloody and entirely defeated. His eyes were completely hollow, devoid of the arrogant architect who thought he could play God with my life. I leaned down, bringing my face just inches from his ear. The scent of his expensive cologne mixed with the metallic tang of his blood. "You calculated everything so perfectly, Julian," I whispered, my voice as cold and smooth as polished marble. "Your logic was flawless, but you forgot one tiny crucial detail. A senior restoration expert at Ethelgard like me spends every single day examining the microscopic integrity of fragile objects. I am professionally trained to recognize absolutely any incision, no matter how small or perfectly hidden on any surface." I pulled back just enough to watch the final devastating realization hit him. The last remaining pillar of his ego completely collapsed. He slumped entirely against the cold steel table, letting out a pathetic guttural sob of absolute despair. As I turned my back on him for the very last time, the sharp metallic click of heavy handcuffs snapping shut echoed loudly through the room. That beautiful sound harmonized perfectly with the frantic, deranged cursing of Vanessa Reed echoing down the secure hallway as federal marshals dragged her away. I walked out of the terminal, the automatic glass doors sliding open to welcome me. I took a deep, grounding breath, filling my lungs with the dry, crisp morning air of Austin, Texas. It tasted like absolute victory. I looked down at my left hand. The diamond and platinum wedding band caught the morning sunlight, glittering with 8 years of beautifully constructed lies. I slid the ring off my finger. There was no hesitation, no lingering nostalgia, no tears. I dropped it straight into the nearest metal trash can. The faint clink it made as it hit the bottom was the sound of a closing chapter. I was not catching a flight to Seattle today. I stepped off the curb and raised my hand easily, flagging down a passing yellow taxi. I opened the door and slid into the back seat. "Where to, ma'am?" the driver asked, looking at me through the rearview mirror. "Take me to the most ruthless divorce attorney in the city," I said, a genuine, radiant smile finally breaking across my face. "I have a very profitable morning ahead of me." As the taxi merged onto the highway, I rolled down the window. There were no more lies, no more hidden boxes in the dark. There was only the vast, clear blue sky of Texas and the intoxicating, limitless horizon of my newfound freedom. Thank you so much for listening to today's story on Zoe Revenge Stories. I would absolutely love to know where you are tuning in from, so please let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story and want to help us keep this channel alive, please consider supporting us with just $1. You can easily donate by scanning the PayPal QR code on your screen or by using the PayPal link provided in the video description and the pinned comment. Your $1 helps pay our dedicated staff, allowing them to support their families and continue bringing you these thrilling stories. Thank you from the bottom of my heart, and I will see you in the next one.